Hey everyone, welcome back. This week we're going to be talking about three presidents, James Madison, James Monroe, and JQA, or John Quincy Adams. And we'll kind of cover the events that happened under each of their presidencies. Okay, so to kick off, we're going to start off with James Madison and the most important event that happens underneath his presidency, which is the War of 1812, one of the most misunderstood wars actually in American history. So President James Madison is another figure that we are going to bring back from the American Revolution. This is kind of another founding father, somebody who's been around since the beginning, and he was Secretary of State during Thomas Jefferson's presidency. He's going to be president from 1809 to 1817. So to kick off, the most important thing about James Madison is the War of 1812, and this is called Mr. Madison's War, which is not really a friendly nickname to the War of 1812. As you can see, he is blamed for this war. It is another fight between the United States and Great Britain, or England. A lot of times this is called the Second War of Independence, like an American Revolution Take Two, Part Two. But we're going to look at why this war happened, because it is the most important event. So there are two main reasons for the War of 1812. Reason number one is something that you learned about last week. If you remember last week with Thomas Jefferson's presidency, there was a new vocabulary word that was called impressment. And impressment was where Great Britain, or England, were essentially stopping American ships and kidnapping American sailors and forcing them into the British military. Now, this was done because Great Britain was upset with our economic policies of who we were trading with, and they were kind of upset that we were being neutral in fights between Great Britain and France. But remember, George Washington, as president, was all about us remaining neutral. So we were trying to not pick a side between Great Britain and France. And Great Britain was not allowing us to remain neutral by kidnapping these sailors. So that made us very angry at Great Britain. Reason number two, Great Britain was also ticking us off by blocking the United States from expanding even more westward or up into Canadian territory. And kind of the theme that we've seen throughout this entire class is that once the settlement of the 13 colonies was made, these settlers have wanted to continue to tick west and expand out into what is the modern day map of the United States. And clearly there's issues with us expanding west. Number one, being Native Americans living on that land, and number two, Britain and France had claimed, and Spain had already claimed chunks of that territory. All right, so the other two events that really kind of help lead into a declaration of war, which, think about this, guys. We just fought the American Revolution. I don't know why I keep saying we, but we just fought the American Revolution. And then now we're going to go back in and fight another war where, the country has not even recovered from fighting the American Revolution. There's still debt, there's a lot of problems that are lingering from that war. So it's silly to go ahead and get into another war. But the other two things that are going to help lead the United States to declare war against Great Britain is a famous battle called the Battle of Tippecanoe, and then new people that are in Congress that are going to get the name War Hawk. And a war hawk is somebody who's screeching to go to war. That's that term, hawk. I actually have a hawk that lives in my backyard right now, and it is screeching. It screeches all the time. So that's why I call it a war hawk, because they're screeching to go to war. The Battle of Tippecanoe. All right, so let's talk about this battle that's going to help lead to the United States declaring war against Great Britain. There's the guy that's going to be president of the United States. His name is William Henry Harrison. We'll learn about him in a couple weeks. He is governor of a new Indiana territory, and he took anybody who was Native American on that territory that did not want to integrate into quote-unquote white society. He booted these people across the Mississippi River. So once again, this is, your very moral dilemma of, can you claim land that people are already living on? Tecumseh, who is a very, very famous Native American chief, goes around and tries to unite Native American tribes against these American settlers and saying, we got to stop giving up our land to these people, or else we're going to have no land left. And Britain is helping Tecumseh with this. They're siding with the Native Americans just so they can be against the United States of America. So the Battle of Tippecanoe was when William Henry Harrison got an army together and attacked kind of the headquarters of the rebellion, which was a place called Prophetstown. And it was a very dirty battle, but it was obviously won by William Henry Harrison's troops, and to the point where William Henry Harrison's nickname is going to be Tippecanoe. When he runs for president, his tagline is Tippecanoe and Tyler too, and you'll learn about that. But this made Harrison, unfortunately, a national hero, but it also ended Tecumseh's rebellion. So this famous battle really pushes a lot of people to support declaring war against the British, because the British helped the Native Americans in this battle over land that people from the United States wanted. The Warhawks are famous Warhawks. Henry Clay is going to be Speaker of the House, which is a very important position. That's Nancy Pelosi today. She's Speaker of the House. So it's in a very important position, and he is this Warhawk. So he is, really influencing the House of Representatives to move towards war. And the other famous Warhawk is John C. Calhoun, who's another person that's big in politics in this time period. So here they are. You're also going to talk about Clay again when we get to Clay's America system. But once again, you just have high people of position in Congress that are screeching for war. And remember, a president has to ask Congress to declare war. So, all right. So here's the reasons they're saying, the United States has to defend its neutrality. This impressment of American soldiers is stopping us from having neutrality. British forts that are out in the West, we need to get rid of them. We need to end the British supporting Native American resistance. The United States wants to take land in Canada, wants to take Spanish Florida, and then this is our second war for independence. So this is the opportunity. The War of 1812 is an opportunity to really prove that, the United States should have won the American Revolution, and that we get to continue to be free from Britain. Okay. So we've answered a lot of questions about the War of 1812. So hopefully you can fill out the two big reasons for the war. There's other two reasons. Talk about the Battle of Tippecanoe. What did the Warhawks want? We can't figure that out. Warhawks want war. And then information about the War of 1812. Okay. All right, so let's talk about some of the specific battles. That's what we're going to look at right here of the War of 1812. So war is declared, okay? Mr. Madison, President James Madison, declares war against Great Britain. And once again, for all of those reasons right here. Some of the biggest battles we have, this is a battle that not only happens on land, but it also happens in the sea, which is Navy battles. And there's some famous ones, like one of the kind of things I always want you to be able to attach to the War of 1812 is the nickname of a ship. The USS Constitution was called Old Ironsides, and this was the opportunity that a American ship stood up to a British ship, which by and large, Great Britain has always had a better Navy. So the fact that we won Navy battles during this is huge. Another famous quote from one of the famous Navy battles that we had, the guy who was in charge of the American ship was a guy named Captain Perry, and he made a famous quote, "We have met the enemy and they are ours." So several big Navy battles that the United States won, which was a huge deal. Other thing are land battles. William Henry Harrison, once again, led troops in the Northwest Territory. They had the Battle of Thames, which was another after Tippecanoe. Andrew Jackson led the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. He's also going to do the Battle of New Orleans. But three big ones, here you go. In 1814, please know, after the British sailed into Chesapeake Bay, they invaded the U.S. Capitol and burned down the White House. So it's kind of funny because normally in war, if you capture somebody else's capital, then it's like capture the flag, then you win. And the British marched into our nation's capital and burned down the White House. So really, they should have kind of won this war. The other famous war or battle in this war is the Battle of Baltimore, which was Fort McHenry, and that's when the Star Spangled Banner was written. We'll talk about that. And then lastly, the Battle of New Orleans, because two things about the Battle of New Orleans. Number one, it was actually fought after the treaty was signed. So this is a totally pointless battle because the war was over and then this battle was fought. And the other thing is it brings to the forefront a guy named Andrew Jackson, who's going to be president in a couple years. All right, so the British burning down Washington, D.C. This is the famous event where Dolly Madison runs out of the White House, taking like famous pieces of artwork like George Washington's portrait and stuff like that. She saves things before the White House is burned down. And then the Star Spangled Banner is written at the Battle of Baltimore. This was when Francis Scott Key was taken prisoner. He was on a British ship. He's in the harbor, and he knows that in the morning he's not going to see the American flag in the fort because he is for certain that the British have taken the fort and that, the Americans have had to surrender. And that's where this song comes from. The sun comes up and he sees the American flag and he writes that, "Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly she hails." He's saying proudly, there goes the American flag. So I've linked for you one of the most famous performances of the national anthem if you really want to listen to those lyrics and think about what they mean now that you know when it was written. So a lot of people think the national anthem was written during the American Revolution, but it was not. It was written during the War of 1812 by a guy sitting on a prison ship right there. All right, lastly, the Battle of New Orleans. Once again, this was led by a guy named Andrew Jackson, who's going to end up being president of the United States. It was fought 2 weeks after the Treaty of Ghent, which is the treaty that ends the war. So it's a very pointless battle, but a lot of people celebrate this battle because the Treaty of Ghent ends the war. Really, it's a stalemate, but the fact that we won the Battle of New Orleans was like, oh, and take that. Like, the war's over, but we still beat you. Haha. The outcome, Andrew Jackson's a national hero, and it's a very patriotic event. Why? I don't know, but there you go. There's famous painting from the Battle of New Orleans, and then there's a song. If you've ever heard it, if you haven't heard it, oh my God, click on it and listen to it. It's hysterical. It's a good old country song about the Battle of New Orleans. 1814, we took a little trip along Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. Took a lot of bacon and we took a lot of beans, headed down south to the land of New Orleans. Sounds like the Beverly Hillbillies. And lastly, what ends the War of 1812? What ends the War of 1812 is the Treaty of Ghent. This is signed because this war is really a stalemate. Britain's over fighting it. Britain doesn't have any money. They were too busy fighting France. They don't want to deal with us anymore. So they signed this treaty. Really, it's interesting, like the War of 1812, yes, the United States held off the British again, but it's kind of a pointless war. A lot of lives were lost, a lot of money was lost, and nothing really happens because of this war. There's no exchange of territory. We don't gain territory because of this war. Our White House was burned down. It's kind of a pointless war. The only big things is manufacturing does increase, which is good. It kind of pushes the United States into a manufacturing direction. Native American resistance declines. This is still going to be a huge issue that we are focusing on as a new nation. And it's a moral dilemma that we focus on today for how we treated the Native American population. And a surge in national pride because of this war, because the United States defeated Great Britain again. So it makes people very proud. The War of 1812 does help kind of unify the nation. And puts everybody again on the idea that we are all one America, as opposed to separate and broken up into states. And that is what James Madison is going, that's what James Monroe is going to inherit as president. Monroe will inherit a national viewpoint instead of a sectional viewpoint. Okay, so that is video number 1. That is about James Madison's presidency. Once again, the biggest thing is the War of 1812. And on your notes, you should be able to fill in everything before the take a break point. All right. I also want your opinion. Do you think the War of 1812 was important or pointless? Explain your opinion. Tell me what you think. Do you think we should have fought that war, or do you think people should have calmed down and we should have, used some diplomatic relations and not had the war? If we didn't have the war, you would not have the Star Spangled Banner, though. So I don't know how I feel about that, because I do love the Star Spangled Banner. All right, good job. We'll catch you on the next video.